Joining me now is Sky News contributor Kosha Gada. Kosha, thanks for joining me. Let's start in the UK. Former Home Secretary Suella Braverman has become the latest Conservative MP to defect to Reform UK. She's actually the third sitting Tory to join Nigel Farage's party in the last 11 days. Here she was making that announcement.
The truth is that in recent years, I have found myself effectively in a social democrat, left-leaning party made up of Conservatives in name only.
There is no way on earth that the Conservative Party will ever take the United Kingdom out of the ECHR, and there is no way on earth it will ever keep its promises to you.
Wow, Kosha, she didn't mince her words there. If you were Tory leader Kemi Badenoch right now, you'd be tearing your hair out. But 3 defections in less than 2 weeks. Where does this leave the Conservatives and what does it mean for the Tories?
It feels like realignment is in the air, Danica, certainly in the UK and everywhere, because all these things are connected. This, of course, is an outgrowth of Brexit and their dissatisfaction with the execution of that after the people did very clearly vote for it. Of course, you have the populist movement in the US and how Trump hijacked the Republican Party much in the same way and defeated the Bush dynasty, the Clinton dynasty, etc. Of course, what we saw right here at home with the coalition split last week and One Nation surging in the polls, it's all sort of shades of the same story. And so I think in the UK, I mean, look, their next election isn't until a few years, so that is a lifetime, multiple lifetimes in politics. But right now, the Tories really, really seem to be down after an 80-year majority, and the movement that is ascendant is populism. Nigel Farage is heading that, and I would not be surprised if we see more defections between now and Election Day.
Yeah, you're right. It's obviously, and it's happened here with One Nation, of course, Barnaby Joyce going over. It's fascinating, the world of Conservative politics right now. But look, let's go to the US. We need to talk about ICE. Donald Trump is sending his border czar, Tom Homan, to take control of operations in Minneapolis. Here was White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt.
Border czar Homan is in a unique position to drop everything and go to Minnesota to continue having these productive conversations with state and local officials. And I know that he's catching a plane in just a few hours to do just that at the request of the president.
This is big news, Kosha. It's been a fascinating few weeks for ICE. What sort of a role will he have on the ground? How big of a difference will it make?
I think, the core issue that the Trump administration is grappling with is this dichotomy, where on the policy itself around illegal immigration, they have the public support for immigration more broadly. And it really is remarkable just in the last decade since President Trump entered the scene. He remade the national discourse on this issue, where today 70% of the country is in support of deporting all illegals, not just the criminal violent ones, but all of them. So that he's got to win. But then on the next stage of that is what that looks like. That is where the country is split, and they are losing support by the day from the Democrats and the independents who don't like what it looks like, and U.S. citizens have been shot, even though they injected themselves into it and all the rest of it. So I think he's trying to battle the court of public opinion while staying true to the policy win. And Tom Homan is ultimately his guy. He's been dealing with this for 20 plus years under multiple administrations. He's very true to the cause. Seems to be a steadier hand on the wheel in terms of dealing with the media and the press, and it's sort of like a change up from Greg Bovine, who was the previous face of this and maybe has been muddied up a little bit in the media. So they're doing a bit of a switcheroo for optics. The real question is, are they going to fundamentally change the policy and the way that they're executing on it or not? And that is, I think, what where these fault lines are drawn, and the left and the right are in a fever pitch on this issue.
Well, I think Trump will be seeing it as a win that Governor Tim Walz has finally agreed to cooperate after many months of really being a complete delinquent, quite frankly, when it comes to this issue. Governor Walz, Trump said that Governor Tim Walz called me with a request to work together with respect to Minnesota. And you mentioned as well Gregory Bovino. The administration's announced that he will leave Minnesota along with some of his agents. Have a listen to this.
If Governor Walz and Mayor Frey implement these common sense cooperative measures, CBP will no longer be needed to support ICE on the ground in Minnesota. ICE and local law enforcement will peacefully work together, as they are effectively doing in so many other states and jurisdictions, to remove violent criminals from American neighborhoods across the country.
Look, Kosha, no doubt tensions are high following the second fatal shooting this month in Minneapolis by immigration officials. But, good to have Walz finally on board. He had no choice.
Yes. Now, many would say seeing is believing, because as politicians tend to do, there can be great phone calls and handshakes, and then the devil's in the details. And he is very clearly on one side of this because he's presided over the fiasco that is illegal immigration in the state of Minnesota over the last several years. But yes, if they do this one narrow thing that Caroline Leavitt was alluding to over there of cooperating on detainers, and what that specifically is the ordered priority by the Trump administration is, of course, to get the violent criminal illegals out first and then go for the non-violent illegals. And a lot of them are in the jails. It is known to the state and local authorities, and they willfully do not cooperate, or they withhold that information from the feds, who are ultimately solely in charge of immigration policy enforcement. So that is what theoretically Tim Walz is now agreeing he will cooperate with. That is a big win to get those folks out. If he does that, Trump loves to give a little, take a little. That's his negotiation style. So I would see him maybe taking down the surge of agents, or getting CBP out of there, as you mentioned, and just leaving ICE in there, or something like that, to try and lower the temperature, which is a good thing for everybody. But I think people are very scarred by what has happened in the country over the last half century on illegal immigration, and the proof will be in the pudding.
Well, look, that's it. And look, the country is scarred, and Donald Trump was elected on a mandate to rid the country of illegal immigration. So he's doing exactly what he was voted in for. Now, I found this next one quite interesting. The chief of NATO has dropped a truth bomb, admitting that Europe is incapable of defending itself without America. Have a look.
And if anyone thinks here, again, that the European Union or Europe as a whole can defend itself without the US, keep on dreaming. You can't. We can't. We need each other.
Kosha, that's quite a stark admission from NATO, of course, fresh off the back of Trump's threats to take Greenland. Doesn't this just prove Trump right all along?
Yes, some would say he's been Captain Obvious, or General Obvious, we should say, with that, because everybody knows that the U.S. has underwritten security and defense for Europe since World War II. I would actually posit that it's probably in Europe's best interest to move the needle towards more self-reliance. But as Margareta said, that is not easy. That these countries are all running on massive debts and deficits, as we know. So is the U.S. But the U.S. still spends a massive amount on defense as an outcome of what happened post-World War II. And Europe doesn't. And they're just not in a position to start spending 3, 4, 5, or even 10% of their GDP on defense, as he mentioned over there, unless they're willing to severely put in place austerity measures, restrict their immigration, do spending cuts across the board, cut their generous social services and safety nets that they have, which they don't seem to have the appetite to do, at least not yet. And therefore, they are reliant on the U.S., and that comes with a price. Greenland is one manifestation of it. There might be others where the U.S. has more power, and if there's a president that's willing to exert that power, such as the current one is, you might see things like that happen that may not have been fathomable or comprehensible to people a few short years ago.
Well, that's true. I mean, he went there last week at Davos with all these threats, and then suddenly said, no, we're at peace. We're not taking Greenland, not imposing those tariffs. But yeah, an interesting admission, and it is a correct admission from NATO there. Let's talk Iran. Look, it's getting worse. The Iranian regime has reportedly now issued nationwide shoot to kill at protesters. The death toll's rising, Kosha. It is getting worse. At what point does the US have to intervene here? Because it almost felt like the US could have shut this down from the beginning, and it hasn't done that yet. How do you see this playing out?
This is a really tricky one because the death toll is rising. It's a very opaque regime, so we never have perfectly transparent information, of course. We would hope that the U.S. president and his team do with better intel assets, but be that as it may, it is getting worse. By the same token, the U.S. president does not really want to get sucked into another quagmire, is the way it's often described in the Middle East, after the failed, but he and his base certainly believe, and the majority of Americans believe, the failed adventurism of the last 25 years with the war on terror. So he's grappling with that. I think he's comfortable with doing surgical strikes, like the 12-day war, or going and capturing Maduro here and there. And even there, he does pay a little bit of a price politically with his base that does not like that, because they fear that it's a slippery slope to more interventionism. And I think that's the line he's walking right now. We see the ships moving into that region, signals being put out there. The Ayatollah is reportedly in hiding because he's worried about some such surgical strike at any moment. But then also Trump is showing, being measured, that really it is not the U.S.'s job to police the world, as heinous as the atrocities may be in the streets of Iran.
No, look, that is a fair point. But yeah, gee, it's not getting any better over in Iran. They're really desperately fighting over there for their freedoms, that's for sure. Now, look, speaking of wars, the remains of the last Israeli hostage in Gaza have been found and identified. This is Ran Vili. He was killed and taken into the Strip on October 7, 2023. Look, there's no doubt this brings another end to a chapter in this massacre. I guess what happens now is the focal point, Kosha. Does it pave the way for this second phase of the ceasefire to begin?
That is certainly the promise. I think it lifts a little bit of a political price that Netanyahu, Prime Minister Netanyahu, had paid in terms of why, fairly or not, why it took so long to get all the hostages and the remains out. He can finally punctuate that and, put an end to it and close that horrible chapter in his nation's history. And yes, that was the precursor for then opening up the crossing. The Board of Peace met when everybody was gathered in Davos recently, and that is sort of getting off the ground. So all these things are coming into place, and we hope that this is something a little bit new. I think the core and the fundamentals of that region remain, and the danger of the conflicts that have happened throughout time do remain. But if the ceasefire holds and there are new structures in place, like the Board of Peace and this chapter ending, and the U.S. president right now being more stronger than the last one, and all the rest of the factors that go into this, we can hope that we're moving another step in the right direction after a very, very bad few years.
Look, absolutely, and there's no doubt that Donald Trump has made this happen, that we can hopefully close this chapter and move into phase 2 of the ceasefire, and it really is thanks to the US president. I want to end on China. The leadership of Beijing's military is in turmoil. The Chinese Defence Ministry said the vice chairman of the Central Military Commission, which controls the armed forces, is under investigation and accused of serious violations of discipline and law. All eyes are really now on Taiwan, Kosha. Where does it leave Taiwan? Does it now de-escalate that threat?
Yes, this was definitely big news. And of course, China is another opaque regime, so it's really hard to know the what and the why. But this person who was removed was aristocratic almost within the party. He was a war vet himself in the China and Vietnam War. I think he stayed something like 7 years past his retirement that he was eligible for. And President Xi personally tapped him to remain 7 years past his retirement and then removed him. So that is definitely shocking news. And he was in charge, as you say, of the Taiwan command. Now we're all reading into this. What does this mean? I don't know. I don't think anybody knows, given the opaque regime. What we do know is that China is moving closer to some sort of reunification strategy or execution of that strategy, whether it's today, whether it's years from now. And I think removing a particular general, as controversial and surprising as it is, doesn't take away from that. They play the long game. They are the strongest that they've ever been, and the U.S. has signaled that it doesn't, again, want to go around policing the world or certainly get involved in a kinetic head-to-head battle against China without coming out and saying it. Trump has signaled that to Xi and in other forums. So I think all those things bode in the direction of China moving towards that. But again, it's anybody's guess when it may or may not happen.
Yeah, and it was only last week when the ambassador said, basically, if you're not with us, you're against us. So let's see if Australia gets drawn into this. Kosha Gada, thanks for your time as always.